I used to love Huawei products. They're one of the very few tech companies that no matter what, I would always tune in to see what they were announcing next, because it just felt like they were consistently trying something new. Then they got banned in 2019. They got banned from selling in the US, they got banned from working with US companies, and they even got banned from working with companies that just use US technology. It was brutal. And given how critical US tech is in the making of a smartphone, everything from the software to the chips to the antennae to get signal, everyone just kind of assumed, well, Huawei is just going to slowly die over the next couple of years and fade into history. But 4.5 years have passed since that ban, and Huawei is not dead. They're still making new products with new features that you probably didn't even know tech products could do right now. Which begs two questions. How are they doing that with all the restrictions? And also, how good are the products now? I've been surprised. I think you will too. So this is their latest stuff. Let's go from the tablet to the earphones to the watches to the thing that I'm most curious about, the smartphones. So this is the MatePad Paper Mat, and on the face of it, it seems pretty unremarkable. It feels very mid-range, like nothing bad about it, but just standard. Standard materials, standard looking camera, standard screen bezels. It's all about what you'd expect for a tablet just under $500. So it doesn't feel as good as Samsung or Apple's top-end tablets. The screen is this matte IPS panel. It's not OLED, and so you might be able to tell that while it can reach a high level of brightness, it just looks a tiny bit faint. It lacks that crunchy contrast, and also has a school computer from your IT suite kind of vibe to it. And also, it's running a mid-range Snapdragon 7 Gen 1 chip, so it's not the fastest. Like, if you check out the delay between my finger hitting this capture button and the tablet actually capturing, that's pretty criminal. But this is where we start to diverge from the tablets you might know. See, this is not running Android. This tablet is running Harmony OS. So years before the US ban actually came into place, clearly Huawei saw it coming, and they'd started working on a backup plan. An operating system of their own that didn't rely on Google's Android, and I guess to compensate getting kicked out of the Google group, a way to create their own group to seamlessly integrate all of their products. Now, on one hand, this is basically Android. To make sure that every Harmony OS product is still compatible with Android apps, Huawei had to start with the basic open source, available to everyone version of Android, and then layer their OS on top of that. But then on the other hand, this whole unification of their various devices that they talked about years ago, I feel like they've done it. So if I swipe down from the control panel, I'll see something called Huawei Super Device. Click into that, and this is basically my entire solar system of Huawei gadgets. And then if you want to link two products, you just drag one into another. So if I drag my earphones into this tablet, they become the audio source instead of the speakers on the tablet. And then within that, I've got settings for how I want that relationship to function, like what kind of sound output I want my tablet to give to these earphones. But the coolest thing is what happens when you also throw a phone into the mix. So I'm getting to the phones themselves later, but just for the purpose of showing this feature, if I link my phone and my tablet together using Huawei Super Device, this is what happens. So that is my phone's home screen. And it's not just showing me what's on my phone. I can use my phone from this. And I spent the last few days figuring out all the things that means you can do, and it's very cool. So for example, if I'm watching a YouTube video on my phone and then I realize I actually want to go big screen, I just go into full screen on my phone, and then automatically it will not just full screen on the tablet, but actually turn it into the full YouTube tablet experience with the tablet user interface, even though it's still actually running off the phone. And that then also clears the phone to do something entirely different. You can do things like drag a photo that you've just taken on your phone into your tablet. I gotta give them credit for this. The devices feel so integrated that you actually forget when you do that you're sending something that's here to here. But then also crazy stuff. Like, let's say for example I set my phone up here, and then from my tablet I can have control over both sets of cameras, like a one-man production studio. The more I've looked into this super device feature, the more I've been surprised at how freeform it is. Essentially, it's however you want your Huawei products to work together, they can do that. Like if you have a Huawei tablet and a Huawei laptop, Super Device means that your tablet can become a second monitor, all wirelessly. Or let's say you wanted to draw something on your laptop, but your laptop's not touchscreen. Well, mirror that screen to your tablet, use your Huawei pen, and draw on that. So far, it's kind of like the Apple ecosystem, in that you feel both strongly encouraged and rewarded for each extra one of their products you buy into. So in isolation, I'd give this tablet a 6 out of 10, but that rating will increase as we add more products into the mix. But first, what are the earphones like? I gotta say, before this video, I'd never even considered actually using Huawei audio products, and I had no gauge on how good or bad they actually are. And well, let's start with their entry-level FreeBuds SE2. Ironically named because I also got them for free when I bought the phones. But you can very much tell that these were designed to be Huawei's version of the basic Apple AirPods. Very similar in terms of material. They look the same apart from this weird C-shaped cutout, and the case actually has a really nice opening and closing mechanism. It's not in the slightest bit loose. The main difference versus AirPods is actually the price. Apple's earphones are $170, Huawei's are $49. So surely there's going to be a massive gap in sound quality, right? Well, actually, no. These earphones, considering the type of earphones they are and that they don't go inside your ears and they just kind of sit next to them, they sound amazing. You notice a little bit of, when loads of instruments are playing at once, a lack of separation between them. But apart from that, the sound is punchy, it's detailed, they don't leak as much noise as AirPods do. I'm actually playing Taylor Swift right now. Not Taylor Swift. I'm listening at my normal listening volume and you probably can't hear anything. And then also, these things last 40 hours of listening time versus Apple's 30 when you're using the case for recharging. My only real gripe was setup. You know when you're first trying to pair your earphones, you think, oh, maybe when I open the case, it'll activate Bluetooth and connect to my phone. No? Okay, well, maybe there's a button on the case that will activate the pairing mode. No. Do you know what you actually have to do? Touch and hold the small visible part of the touch-sensitive area on both earbuds at the same time while they're still in the case. It doesn't feel like it's been completely thought through. And then I had further problems getting the app on my phone to recognize them. Fiddly, but at least you only have to do that once, and it is all sorted now. So I would genuinely give these a 9 out of 10 and strongly recommend them. And they actually had me quite excited for the next tier. And that is the FreeBuds 5, which at $170 of 3.5 times the SE2s, exactly the same price as the AirPods, and definitely not free with the phone. And honestly, I have no idea what Huawei was thinking when they made these. You know, like within any given company's product lines, you expect some sort of design consistency, right? But, I mean, spot one similarity between these two earphones. Apart from the fact that they're both earphones. I do wonder if these were designed by completely separate teams. I mean, it wouldn't surprise me. Huawei actually has a lot more employees than you'd think. They're over 200,000, which is actually more than Apple, who are just over 150,000. I mean, these FreeBuds 5, they look like some sort of alien drop pod from another dimension. But do you know what? I respect that. You immediately notice a lot more tech. Like these earphones, they know when they're out of the case, they know when they're in and out of your ears, so they can pause and resume what you're playing. And yes, the case actually has a pairing button on it. And the app's actually really good. You can make your own equalizer, you can click Find My Earphones and they'll start beeping for you. It's a good feature. And also, as we were saying earlier, these synergize really well the more Huawei products you have. Because let's say I'm listening through earphones on my tablet, but I want to transfer those earphones now to listening to the audio from my phone. How do you do that? Well, open Super Device on your phone, you'll see all the available Huawei devices floating around this one, drag the earphones in, and the switch in connection is instant. Plus, the FreeBuds 5 have noise isolation. You very rarely see active noise cancellation on earphones that don't actually go inside your ears, and upon using them, you can kind of see why. You can notice it the second you turn it on, like it does muffle the background noise, but you kind of have to pay attention to it to notice the difference. It definitely doesn't have that sitting in your own bubble feeling that you get with proper noise cancelling buds. Mostly because with this type of design, there's way more likely to be slight gaps where outside noise can still get to your eardrums. And you know what? They're actually not even that comfy. You know, you kind of expect with the design this wacky that Huawei's figured out some sort of ergonomic secret that no one else has, which is kind of what they painted out to be. But no, really, they're just like you took a normal pair of earphones and you started melting them. They're similar feeling to the SE2s, but because they're heavier and a bit girthier, you just notice them a lot more. And the sound quality is, yes, slightly better than the SEs. It's high-res audio, but really, these are not worth 3.5 times the price of these. So I'm giving them a 7. And then the final pair of earphones is the top-of-the-line FreeBuds Pro 2, which have a pretty similar style to the 5s, but they're a bit less weird. And these are also co-engineered by DVLA. And yeah, most of these types of collaborations, they are a bit of a stretch, but I'd be lying if I said that logo didn't at least get me a bit excited. After all, the most impressive speaker I've ever heard in my life was made by DVLA. And you know what? Yeah, these are pretty pro. They're actually dual driver earphones, meaning that each earbud has not one, but 2 little speakers inside of it, which can help for specialization. You can have one focused on bass and one focused on higher notes. And honestly, these are a big step up in sound. Surprisingly comfy given their chunkiness and very isolating. You put them in, the world around you disappears. This is a good product. It's just Well, the finish is very glossy, so you put one finger on it and you will see that. And also, the battery life is not great. They say it should last 30 hours. I'd say it actually lasts about 25, which feels low compared to the 40 that you can get out of their most basic earphones. So I would give the pros an 8. Okay, so far, the answer to our original question of how good are Huawei products now is actually pretty good, better than I expected. And that's without even talking about the smart watches, which I think is where they're doing some of their coolest stuff. So there's 2 new models as part of their GT4 range. They've got a 46mm version, which is a bit too active looking for me, but this 41mm is completely different. I guess they've decided to use these 2 different sizes to not just target people who want a big watch versus a small watch, but 2 types of people with completely different watch tastes. And that's the second thing. The fact that they're circular means that they actually do look like watches. I'm wearing this 46mm one for the last week, and even though it's not my personal favorite, I've already had 2 people specifically divert conversation to tell me they love my watch. I was torn about it at the start, because I thought, well, the more rectangular shape of the Apple Watch should be more practical, because it's a bit closer to the smartphone form factor. But honestly, I have not once felt like I'm missing out on functionality. These watches are running a formatted version of Harmony OS, the same OS as the tablets, but the thing is that every baked-in app feels like it uses the space of the screen fully and efficiently. You get thorough, detailed insights that link straight to the Huawei Health app on your phone. This definitely gives the impression of a really high-end bit of kit with some really good quality sleep tracking on top of that. And oh yeah, this is mildly creepy. Anytime you lose your phone,
I'm here.
What is that about? The fact that it's a circle means your watch faces can be much more realistic. And this idea they had to have a blooming watch face, where the flower opens up more and more the more exercise you do, is so smart. Probably the best thing actually is the battery. Most high-end smartwatches will get you through a full day. This will legitimately get you through a full week. I think these watches have really high potential. You know, they're just useful. Like, the number of times I've been sitting for long periods of time and then my watch will actually tell me that, encouraging me to get up and walk around for a bit. It's just, there's 2 things that let them down for me. One is the App Store. There's a more limited selection than most other smartwatches, and those apps have to be installed via your phone app. And then 2 is the consistency between the apps. Some apps are beautiful to look at, and they run at a silky smooth 60 frames per second. Others look incredibly basic and run at poor frame rates, like genuinely quite reminiscent of the apps that you got when the very first smartphones were just appearing. Huawei actually has a ton of smartwatches, like probably more than any other company out there, all the way from sub $100 to plus $2,500. But this should give you an idea of the core software that underpins all of them. Right, time for the most interesting product of them all. Let's talk about the phones. So Huawei's had 2 major flagship launches recently. This one is the Huawei P60 Pro, which still comes with a full-size box including everything you need for the phone. I think this is still the default for phones sold in China, whereas it's more in the West where we have this whole focus on eco packaging. And I genuinely think this phone looks decadent. Huawei isn't afraid to try different things in the name of fashion, and in this case I'd say it's worked. But then this is the new Huawei Mate 60 Pro. And let me tell you, as a piece of hardware, this is the nicest phone I think I've ever held in my hands. I just think this company has made every possible correct decision and then gone further than anyone else has. This triple dot setup is, I think, a pretty cool way of still having proper 3D face scanning ability while minimizing the amount of solid black permanently on your screen. It's less of an interruption than Apple's Dynamic Island, and actually faster at face scanning. Plus, we've just realized today something else very cool it allows it to do, which is to constantly be looking to see if your eyes are looking at the phone screen. If they are, the screen will be on, and as soon as you look away, the screen will turn off, which is great for battery and also being able to check your notifications. It's like a smarter version of the always-on display, because it's only always on when you need it to be always on. The body of the phone is matte all the way around, and while the bottom can get some fingerprints, the top section is completely resistant. The corners, extremely curved. It doesn't feel like you're holding a sharp object. It's the opposite. And the fact that the backplate smoothly transitions into the sides means there's no seam to worry about. But then also, this screen. We've seen curved sides on a screen before, but this is really softly, evenly curved from every single angle, top, bottom, corners. And they've done that without making the borders uneven or having any weirdness with the corners, which you tend to get when you try and do this, and like you have with the P60. Honestly, if I could snap my fingers right now and make my iPhone or my S23 Ultra feel like this, I would do it right now. The glass on this is also meant to be something quite special. It's called Kunlun Glass 2, and they're saying it's the strongest smartphone glass in the world. So, tell you what, let's look at the rest of the phone, and then we will actually test it against Apple's Ceramic Shield. The hardware, of course. So honestly, I think the software, which is Harmony OS again, is very pretty. I mean, it's packed with bloatware, don't get me wrong. I'm counting 58 pre-installed apps, not to mention a separate popular apps folder, which is obviously just a way to advertise without it feeling like an advert. But animations, very smooth. Similar quality to the iPhone, but just with more flexibility and flair. And it works so well with the curved glass from every angle to create this feeling of elegance and gracefulness. And if you're enjoying this rare look into Huawei right now, then a lot has gone into making it happen, so a sub to the channel would be harmonious. Also, I'm heading off to Japan today for a once-in-a-lifetime trip where I'll get to see lots of cool tech like this, so follow me on Instagram if you want to keep up with that. Anyway, everything responds to your touch in a way that makes sense. Like when you move an app on your home screen, the apps around the point where you drop it, they pulse, as if they've just felt the impact of your move. When you're flicking between your recent apps, the app that you're currently holding actually pulls away from the rest, like it has real elasticity. And the transitions when you select your quick settings, it's clear that time has been spent here. But also, you can do some really unusual stuff, like sort your apps by color, which the ultra-organized part of me finds highly satisfying. And you can peek into apps, not just by holding them down like you can on other phones, but swiping up on their icons. Like, isn't this such a cool way to be able to speed dial? And there's so many really high-quality widgets, with even the ability to group multiple into one tile so they're more space efficient, and drag one widget on top of another to merge them into one. Okay, so all this surface-level stuff, that's all well and good, but one of the big questions on my mind here is, years on after the ban, where they lost contact with Google and so many other app and hardware suppliers, what has Huawei decided to do about it? How have they adapted their phones to still make them viable? So you do have a Huawei App Store. They call it the App Gallery. I would say it's functional, but it's janky. I think Huawei's realized that if they really want to compete, you can't feel like there's no app out there that you can't use because you're using a Huawei phone. So they found a way to make just about everything work, but it's not necessarily the smoothest workaround. Like, there are a lot of mainstream apps that you can just go onto App Gallery and download straight away, like Booking.com and Snapchat and Telegram, but there's a lot that aren't, like Instagram. And when that happens, the store, no joke, it takes you to the App Parks website to download the APK file and install it yourself. But also then, there are some apps whose entire code base runs on Google services, which are banned from Huawei, like the map system in Uber, for example. So installing the app on the phone via APK file, it still wouldn't allow the app to run properly. So what Huawei's done is, instead of linking you to the apps to download, creating quick apps for the apps. Basically things that look like native apps, but are actually just shortcuts that take you to the mobile web pages. They work, they're not pretty. Now, there is also a tool they're bundling in called GSpace, which seemingly does give you full access to Google Apps, but it's just those apps have to be accessed via this specific GSpace portal, because I guess what's happening is when you enter this space, it's masking the real identity of your phone. It does work, but the fact that it is allowing you to access something that's banned makes it feel like a legal gray area. Oh, and it has a full screen ad every time you click on something. So if you're wondering what the state of Huawei is right now, then it's basically, if you decide that you want to use a Huawei phone and you're not in China, you still can. There's a way to make just about every single thing that you want to do work. You've just got to be ready to put up with some jankiness. The only thing that you can't change is chipsets, and this is where it gets really weird. So basically, when the US ban first happened, the reason it seemed like the end for Huawei was the chipset situation. Huawei was at the time having their chips made by TSMC in Taiwan, but they were then blocked from that because TSMC was using US technology. Qualcomm was another option for chips, but since they're an actual US company, they couldn't really help out either. And then it didn't seem like any Chinese company could make their own high-end chips, because the extreme ultraviolet lithography machines required to do so were literally being made by one company, who also couldn't talk to them. But two things have happened since then. One, that Huawei has now been granted a license to work with Qualcomm on the basis that they only buy 4G versions of their chips instead of the 5G versions, and older versions of those chips at that. So this Huawei P60 Pro, for example, even though it's a 2023 phone, it uses a nerfed 4G version of a 2022 Qualcomm chip. But then this new Mate 60 Pro has done what the US didn't even think was possible. Somehow, out of nowhere, this thing apparently has its own made in China, modern architecture 7nm Kirin 9000S chip, capable of 5G download speeds. These are all things that, according to US sanctions, should not have been able to happen. Even even though not bleeding edge tech, it seems like the idea of the US sanctions was to effectively send Huawei back into the stone age of technology, and this is a clear demonstration of how that actually hasn't happened. So there's a lot of rumors going on right now. Some people speculate that it's actually a 14nm process that's been modified to act like a more recent 7nm chip. Some reports are saying it's a reskinned version of a chip that Huawei used to get from TSMC before they were banned. Or a Chinese company actually has internally rebuilt from the ground up the tech required to make proper high-end 5G chips. No concrete answers yet, but it's all just very weird. Alright, but the cameras were always the highlight of Huawei phones, so where are they now? Well, if you watch my video about the smartphone camera explained, you'll find this especially interesting, because these phones, as well as using their ultra-wide cameras, can also use their 3.5x telephoto cameras for close-up macro shots, which is honestly better. It means you can get super close to objects without actually needing to get super close and distort them or block all the light getting to them, and the end shots just look really high quality and cinematic. And also, these phones have a completely variable aperture. So you go into Pro mode, and just like with a real high-end lens, you can adjust this dial to select any aperture you want in between f1.4 and f4. I gotta say, I miss these cameras so much. I mean, they have like the fastest shutter time of any phone. The stabilization is amazing. I took this on a motorway. My car was shaking, this camera was not. They have super wide front cameras for big group shots, and the night mode. The night mode is as capable as I remember it to be versus its peers. I actually took these against my iPhone 15 Pro Max, and while Huawei has a slight leg up because its main camera is naturally more zoomed in, it's equally pretty clear that they haven't fallen behind here. Okay, so you film on the P60 Pro, and I'm gonna do this durability test. Okay, have you ever got one of these texts or one of these fake login attempt emails? I know, I get them like 3 times a week. And essentially when that happens, someone is trying to either hack you or scam you. But how do they even get your information? Okay, this is height 1 drop on Apple Ceramic Shield. Completely unmarked. Well, let's say that you play an online game and that game's servers got hacked. Now, anyone who's hacking game servers, they're not doing it because they just got bored on their day off. No, they're going to sell that data to people who want to use it for stuff like this. And if you use the same username and password across multiple accounts, then you're basically exposed from every angle. All right, height drop 2. Yikes. Still okay. And that is why I use Guardio. Guardio is pure security. It alerts me in real time once my passwords leak. It lets you know where those passwords have leaked from so you can take immediate action. Okay, this has to break now. 3, 2, 1. Unbelievable. Yeah, this ball. Hammer from height 2. There we go. That was quite serious damage. Guardio also protects you from emails, which you might think are innocent, but are actually designed to steal your data. Web pages that are constructed to get hold of your payment details, and also just malware in general. And we've got a 7-day trial, as well as 20% off the already affordable subscription cost, which covers 5 users under 1 account. And that'll auto-apply if you head to guard.io/boss. The iPhone is very durable. Let's see if this is the same. That does nothing. Okay, let's drop from H2. Still nothing. And the final test to see if Kunlun glass can beat ceramic shield. That took 3 smacks. So actually, yes, that is the toughest glass I've ever seen on a phone.
What? Huawei made a foldable screen laptop? Quick, get R&D to work on that right away. Oh, get him to stop. Oh, hi there. I'm Sam Tucker, head of innovation. And you may have heard recently that Huawei has just announced their all-new MateBook Fold, a spring-loaded laptop with a giant foldable screen, which you can use for multitasking, or if you want to type on a keyboard that's more fragile and shallow than our one was. Yeah, people called this design flawed and faulty. But come on, it's not bad. You don't need all the keys to work. So you can change the color and style of their touch keyboard, or if you want physical keys, it also comes with a Bluetooth one that magnetically sits on top. So it'll act just like a normal laptop until you try to close it. Yeah, it looks like Huawei laptops have to come with warning labels. Whereas with Apple, our products don't break while you use them, they break in your pocket. But you were sitting wrong. It's got an inbuilt kickstand to prop the screen up if you want to use it like a big portable desktop, or you can hold it and use it like a giant iPad. Except instead of the limiting iPad OS, it has the more limiting Harmony OS. Even so, they've basically got 2 touchscreens working on their computers when we can't even get one going. Come on guys, innovate! Download Johnny Ive to Apple Intelligence and call him Johnny A. Ive. Besides, we haven't made any folding device yet because you know what they say about folding screens, don't you, Huawei? Fold me once, shame on you. Fold me twice, double shame on you. Because your double floppy phone sucked. Anyway, why do we care about this? Isn't Lenovo the one making that folding screen laptop? Yes, that was us. Hello there. Sorry, we didn't want to be in the title of this video because, well, you know, because nobody cares. Because nobody cares, yes, thank you. But, you know, we're okay with that. And let me just say that one of our folding laptops beats Huawei's in smallness, squareness, and thickness. Congratulations. Also, well done to Huawei's Courage team, who are only charging $3,300 for this 18-inch screen. I mean, you tried, guys, but I'm sorry. The real pros charge $3,500 for 3 inches of screen. It's not the size that counts, but how much you charge for it. The upcoming MateBook flop. Sorry, Huawei, but you're folding it wrong. This is how you fold.
Subscribe today.
You know, they have all that screen real estate, but they still feel compelled to put their logo right in the middle. Classy move. Hey everyone, thanks for watching the video. And subscribe for more fun tech news and parodies. And if you don't mind me, I'm going to put my logo in the middle, because that's what the cool kids do.
Looking for the best Huawei phones? Whether you're after a top-tier camera, seamless multitasking, or smooth app performance, Huawei continues to deliver incredible smartphones that cater to all your needs. In this countdown, we'll be exploring the top 5 best Huawei phones. As always, you can check the pricing for any of these products in the description below. Let's dive right in. Number 5, Huawei P30 Lite. At number 5, we have the Huawei P30 Lite 128GB, 4GB RAM, a stylish and affordable smartphone that doesn't compromise on performance. This phone features a sleek design with a 6.15-inch Full HD Plus display, offering excellent clarity and vibrant colors for media consumption and everyday use. This may be a budget option, but it comes packed with a capable triple camera setup on the back, headlined by a 48-megapixel primary sensor. The camera system performs admirably, capturing detailed shots in various lighting conditions and providing AI enhancements for optimal results. Powering the Huawei P30 Lite is the Kirin 710 chipset, paired with 4GB of RAM. While it's not a flagship processor, it still provides enough power to handle everyday tasks like social media, browsing, and light gaming. The 128GB of internal storage is a major highlight, offering ample room for apps, photos, and videos without worrying about running out of space. Additionally, the P30 Lite's battery life is reliable, with a 3340 mAh battery that supports fast charging to keep you going throughout the day. If you're looking for a budget-friendly Huawei phone that delivers solid camera performance, decent multitasking, and plenty of storage, the Huawei P30 Lite is a fantastic option for students, young professionals, or anyone who wants great features without breaking the bank. Number 4, Huawei Nova 9. At number 4, we have the Huawei Nova 9, a mid-range smartphone that delivers an impressive blend of style, performance, and camera capabilities. The Nova 9 features a 6.57-inch OLED display with a 120Hz refresh rate, offering smooth scrolling and vibrant colors, perfect for gaming, media consumption, and daily use. Its sleek and lightweight design makes it comfortable to hold, and the phone's shimmering finish adds a premium touch. One of the standout features of the Huawei Nova 9 is its powerful camera system. Equipped with a 50-megapixel ultra-vision camera, an 8-megapixel ultra-wide lens, and 2 additional sensors for depth and macro shots, this phone is a strong contender for photography enthusiasts. Whether you're capturing landscapes or close-up details, the Nova 9 delivers sharp, colorful, and high-quality images. Its front-facing 32-megapixel selfie camera also performs exceptionally well, even in low-light conditions. Under the hood, it is powered by the Snapdragon 778G processor, paired with 8GB of RAM. This ensures snappy performance for multitasking and gaming. The phone supports 4G connectivity and runs Huawei's Harmony OS, offering a smooth and customizable user experience. With a 4300mAh battery and 66-watt fast charging, the Nova 9 keeps you powered throughout the day, recharging from 0 to 100% in less than an hour. For users seeking a stylish and capable phone, the Huawei Nova 9 is a fantastic option. Number 3. Huawei Nova 5T. At number 3 is the Huawei Nova 5T YALL21, a powerful mid-range device that punches above its weight. The Nova 5T packs a 6.26-inch Full HD Plus display, making it perfect for watching videos, gaming, and browsing. But where this phone really shines is its camera performance. With a quad camera setup, including a 48-megapixel main sensor, an ultra-wide camera, and dedicated macro and depth sensors, you can capture stunning photos with ease. The Nova 5T excels at delivering sharp images with vivid colors, making it ideal for photography lovers on a budget. Under the hood, the Huawei Nova 5T is powered by the Kirin 980 chipset, coupled with 6GB of RAM. This combination ensures smooth multitasking and app performance, whether you're gaming or switching between multiple apps. The 128GB of internal storage offers plenty of space for your files, apps, and photos. Battery life is also solid, with the 3750 mAh battery providing all-day usage on a single charge. If you're seeking a balance of performance, camera quality, and value for money, the Huawei Nova 5 TYALL21 is a great option. Number 2. Huawei Mate 20 Pro. Securing the number 2 spot on our list is the Huawei Mate 20 Pro Max, a standout device in Huawei's lineup that combines style, performance, and cutting-edge technology. The Mate 20 Pro Max is equipped with a 6.7-inch OLED display, offering vibrant colors and stunning clarity, making it perfect for media consumption, gaming, and everyday use. The larger screen size, combined with a 120Hz refresh rate, ensures smooth scrolling and an immersive viewing experience. Under the hood, the Mate 20 Pro Max is powered by Huawei's Kirin 9000S processor, designed to handle intensive tasks with ease. Whether you're gaming, multitasking, or streaming, this phone delivers top-tier performance without lag. The device also comes with 8GB of RAM and up to 512GB of internal storage, providing ample space for apps, photos, and videos. One of the highlights of the Mate 20 Pro Max is its impressive camera setup. It features a triple lens system with a 108-megapixel main sensor, an ultra-wide lens, and a telephoto lens for versatile photography. Whether you're capturing detailed landscapes, crisp portraits, or distant subjects, the Mate 20 Pro Max delivers sharp, high-quality images. Additionally, the device supports 5G connectivity and offers long battery life with a 5000 mAh battery and fast charging capabilities to keep you powered throughout the day. With its premium design, powerful specs, and outstanding camera performance, the Huawei 20 Pro Max is an excellent choice for anyone seeking a high-end smartphone that excels in every category. Number 1. Huawei Mate X3. Taking the top spot is the Huawei Mate X3, a premium foldable phone that redefines versatility and cutting-edge design. The Mate X3 boasts a 7.85-inch OLED display when unfolded, providing a tablet-like experience that's perfect for multitasking, watching videos, or working on the go. Fold it, and you get a 6.4-inch cover display, making it one of the most flexible devices on the market. This dual-screen setup offers an innovative user experience, catering to productivity and entertainment alike. What makes the Mate X3 stand out is not just its impressive displays, but also its powerful internals. With a whopping 12GB of RAM and 512GB of storage, this phone is built for heavy multitasking, gaming, and storing large amounts of media and files. Powered by the Snapdragon 8 Plus Gen 1 processor, it delivers top-tier performance, capable of running the most demanding apps and games with ease. Camera enthusiasts will also appreciate the Mate X3's triple camera setup, featuring a 50-megapixel main sensor, a 13-megapixel ultra-wide lens, and a 12-megapixel periscope telephoto lens. Whether you're taking wide-angle shots or zooming in, the Mate X3 produces excellent results in a variety of lighting conditions. With a 4800 mAh battery capacity and 66-watt fast charging, you won't need to worry about running out of power during the day. For those who want the pinnacle of innovation and performance, the Huawei Mate X3 is the ultimate foldable. And there you have it, our picks for the top 5 best Huawei phones. Whether you're into photography, multitasking, or just need a reliable smartphone for everyday use, Huawei has something for everyone. Be sure to check the description below for pricing details on these fantastic devices. Which one caught your eye? Let us know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and happy phone hunting!
Huawei should be dead by now. They had to fight more and bigger sanctions than any other major company in recent history. But then, look at their revenues. They're not only not dead, they're basically back to their previous 2020 peak when the sanctions were applied. And look at their profits too. Those never actually dipped below a 5% margin overall, meaning that even in the craziest years, they, at least on paper, never actually lost money. Oh, and also, look at this phone. It's called the Pura X, which is not only an experimental new form factor, which a company on the brink of death could certainly not afford to gamble on, but it's also a phone that launched with Harmony OS next. That's a proper new operating system Huawei has built for itself from the ground up to replace Android, Windows, and all the other foreign systems that they have historically used. Last quarter, Huawei also managed to regain the #1 spot in its home country of China, meaning that after it fell from grace 5 years ago, it now is the market leader in smartphones in the world's largest phone market again. What's more, their growth is also not on the back of cheap devices, but increasingly that of proper flagships. In the premium segment in China, their platform called Harmony has more than twice as much market share as all Android brands combined, and it's also quickly taking share from iOS again, according to Counterpoint. And beside that, Huawei has also continued to massively expand its portfolio of devices, plus they also entered whole new business segments like self-driving software for cars, AI chips, and more. They made a huge comeback that was possible through the combination of some really interesting engineering, loads of help from the Chinese state, and also massive strategic blunders from the US, in my opinion. Let's explore. Disclaimer, I bought and imported the Pura X myself. Huawei Germany sent me these devices as review units, but they're going back to Huawei later, and no money exchanged hands. Instead, this video was sponsored by my streaming service Nebula. Before the bans that started in 2020, Huawei was an absolute giant. Their revenues reached almost 900 billion Chinese yuan, or roughly $120 billion, and for context, that means they had about as much revenue 4 years ago as Nvidia has achieved this year after its massive AI boom. Their biggest business segment was what they called consumer, which was basically phones, tablets, watches, and the like, and before the ban they even briefly managed to become the #1 best-selling smartphone brand in the world. They very briefly beat Samsung during the pandemic shortages, with their strongest markets being China and Europe. Huawei was even the only Android brand other than Samsung who successfully made their own chips for their phones, and by all accounts, those were very competitive too. Meanwhile, their second biggest business unit was what they called Carrier, which basically meant Huawei supplying the networking equipment, software, and services for mobile network operators like T-Mobile, for example. And here, Huawei was pretty obviously the world leader at the time of the ban. But then the US passed new rules that were clearly designed to crush both of these big businesses. For telecom equipment, the US outright banned their use by American carriers and placed loads of pressure on allied nations to do the same. This made many of the world's biggest networks and carriers completely inaccessible to Huawei. Meanwhile, the US also placed Huawei on the Entity List, which meant that any firm that used US technology could only do business with Huawei if the US gave them explicit permission to, which for many, like Google services and chip manufacturing tech for example, they did not. Those are clearly very big problems for Huawei's Android, chip, and telecom businesses as well, so they really should have killed the company, right? Well, I think they could have if the US and its allies actually went all out with the implementation, but that's not exactly what happened. For telecom equipment, China of course continued to be Huawei's biggest and best customers, while lots of non-US aligned countries like Brazil continued to use them heavily too. And even among allies, many, like Germany, who had huge deployments, delayed their pullout by many years, while countries like Saudi Arabia and Hungary, that are I guess at least nominally US aligned, not only did not kick Huawei out from their networks, but instead fully embraced them. And even more spicy is that just recently, we've learned that Huawei allegedly also bribed 15 members of the European Parliament to give them favorable treatment on the continent too. This case is still under investigation, but it's clear that whether it's through legitimate or illegitimate means, Huawei found plenty of buyers for its networking tech despite the US pushback. But anyway, even more surprising was that a while after the US chip ban, Qualcomm successfully lobbied the US to let them sell Snapdragon chips to Huawei so they could use those in their phones instead of the high silicon chips that they developed for themselves before. This means that Huawei could just keep making phones, with the one caveat being that they weren't allowed to turn on 5G on them. And this is such a ridiculous regulatory move. Like, what set of conditions makes Huawei a major national security threat unless they only use Snapdragon chips and only with 4G turned on? That makes no sense at all. I mean, I'm sure Huawei hated selling phones with only 4G when they themselves were the world leader in 5G technologies. It's very ironic, but of course the phones still worked, and so they also just kept selling them. In China especially, where Google services weren't used anyway, Huawei's phone business could at least survive. It chugged along and waited for better days. Similarly, Huawei got an approval to buy Windows licenses, Intel and AMD chips, and other American components for their laptops and other electronic categories, so those could stay alive as well. In other words, American businesses lobbied their way into some sweet deals that basically kept Huawei's various businesses alive that would have probably died short-term without them. There's the saying that the US doesn't lose wars, it just loses interest, and I think that's exactly what happened here. The bans were enacted with big fanfare originally, and then the politicians kinda just lost interest in actually really enforcing them. Here's an analogy. If Huawei was a hydra, then the US had just chopped a few of its heads off, but then decided it got bored halfway through the job and then left. Except also its own lobbyists convinced them to keep feeding the remaining heads for a quick buck. That is of course a terrible strategy because the Hydra is still alive, it's gonna grow its heads back, and it's angrier than ever. So here's what they did. Before anything, Huawei was in immediate need of cash and loads of it. The company suddenly had to deal with both collapsing revenues and also higher expenses as they needed to spend big to engineer themselves out of the various restrictions. Looking at their finances then, it's pretty amazing that on paper at least, profitability not only never dipped below 5%, but actually spiked in 2021. The biggest and most publicly visible reason for this is Huawei making the painful decision to sell off Honor. Honor was a sub-brand of Huawei which at its peak in 2018 made over 70 million phones, or more than a third of Huawei's total smartphone output. Honor was a giant and would have easily been a top 10 phone brand on its own. So Huawei spun it off as a separate company, which Reuters estimates gave it a much-needed cash injection of about $15 billion. The spin-off was based on the fact that while Huawei was sanctioned, Honor, as a new and separate company, would not be, so if Huawei gave them a bunch of IP, their international sales networks, etc., Honor could make a comeback, especially on international markets where Huawei would struggle for years. Indeed, this has worked. Honor phones have had pretty decent sales, for example, in Europe once again, and there are speculations that once Huawei feels confident enough in a few years with their recovery, they could just buy the firm back again. And if you think about it, it's pretty strange that the US allowed Honor to escape their sanctions, because if Huawei phones are a national security threat, why aren't Honor phones as well? The company that now operates Honor is called Shenzhen Zhixin New Information Technology Limited Company, and they initially put out a really complex list of shareholders, but upon further digging, the controlling shareholder seems to be the State-Owned Asset Supervision and Administration Commission of the State Council of the Shenzhen government, along with some of Huawei's former business partners. This means that Honor is at least as entangled with the CCP as Huawei ever was. Now, it's beyond the scope of this video to discuss whether Huawei should have been banned in the first place or not, but I find the double standard with Honor really quite confusing. But of course, it's great news for Huawei. Because of the huge cash injection from Honor, plus the slow pullout from telco partners, Huawei secured a few years of a runway during which the company could focus on reinventing itself. I dug through some financial statements to make this graph showing Huawei's R&D expenditures as a proportion of their revenues, and then also compared them to the figures of Apple and Samsung, and I gotta say, this chart speaks volumes. Before the ban, Huawei was hovering at around 15%, which was already way higher than their competitors, and by the way, they also outspent Apple in total dollar terms. After the ban, they made yet another jump with a peak of a pretty bonkers 25%. Now, this has two reasons. First, revenues collapsing automatically increases this ratio if the spending stays the same, and two, of course, Huawei also went on a mad scramble to reinvent itself. And these 20+% aren't even the whole picture, because as I'll show you later on, the Chinese government also does a whole bunch of R&D, for example, around chips, and then essentially just hands that over to Huawei. Anyway, what did Huawei spend all that money on? Well, their first and simplest direction came from the realization that unlike phones, accessories like smartwatches and earbuds, for example, were relatively unaffected by the bans, even outside of China, and so Huawei doubled down on those heavily. They made them usable with any phone, not just a Huawei one, invested heavily into marketing, especially across regions like Europe and the Middle East, with me, for example, having attended their latest massive event in Berlin just a few days ago, and then they also spent a lot of money on making their accessories really quite good. The Watch 5 here, for example, has a titanium and sapphire glass construction, 4 to 11 days of battery life, top-tier accuracy for fitness tracking, and the biometric sensor not just on your wrist, but also one on the side for your finger. They say that this is because you can measure things like blood oxygen levels much more accurately on your fingertips, which is why medical-grade pulse oximeters clamp on your fingers as well. In China, I also briefly tried a Huawei watch which has a little inflatable tube inside the band, so it can give you medical-grade blood pressure monitoring right from your wrist, while their earbuds have plenty of funky designs and high-end features too. While this is admittedly a smaller business than phones, it does seem to work globally for the company even when their phone sales have faltered, and last year Huawei was quietly the second largest smartwatch brand in the world, for example, well ahead of Samsung by volume. Also, with a Watch 5, for example, costing €549, we're not talking about insignificant amounts of money either. Then, a bit more novel was Huawei also jumping into cars. With China having 200 plus new auto brands that all needed new software and electrical components, Huawei saw a niche emerging for itself, and so it developed a full suite of solutions for self-driving software, in-car infotainment systems, and more for them. They claim that they've sold 23 million components just last year, and they have tons of automakers on board, including, by the way, even Toyota, who made their latest BZ7 with Huawei tech in China. Huawei clearly thinks that the automotive business in China is relatively well isolated from US sanctions and also has big growth potential. And next, Huawei also doubled down on a few of its other businesses that were relatively untouched by the sanctions as well, such as a pretty massive energy solutions business that they call Digital Power. But most interesting to my audience perhaps is how they went about their two biggest problems: chips and software. Starting with software, while Huawei was banned from using Google services, Android itself is of course open source, so there was no mechanism to ban them from using that. In addition, as we said, the US officially allowed Huawei to keep buying Windows licenses for their laptops. So Huawei could have decided to just somehow make do with the setup, but instead they chose to go all out and to make a single, unified OS for all device form factors that they themselves fully controlled. The Pura X is the first device that actually runs a completely Android-free version of Harmony OS right out of the box, and meanwhile just a few weeks ago Huawei also revealed their first ever laptop running the same Harmony OS Next, while they also have a brand new foldable tablet computer thingy that can do the same too. This version is called Harmony OS 5, or also Harmony OS Next. It's the fifth major iteration of Huawei's operating system efforts, and its development has been absolutely fascinating. Huawei couldn't just swap Android to a whole new operating system overnight, so instead they devised a pretty clever, gradual transition. See, earlier versions of the operating system, like you can see with Harmony OS 4 here on this tablet, actually still operate with a ton of Android code. Here, Huawei has already replaced the Google services with what's called the HMS Core, which is Huawei's own equivalent. They ship not just the default apps like Maps and the App Store, but also all the background services like those that are checking for your notifications, security services for banks, etc. On top of that, Huawei also made it trivially easy to install MicroG, which is an open source way of spoofing Google services so that most of the Android apps just work out of the box. Then Huawei took Android and they started replacing it bit by bit using Harmony OS code. With each release, Harmony OS handled more and more of the tasks like authentication, device connectivity, etc. You could even run simple but native Harmony OS apps and native Android apps side by side at some point. Huawei also introduced a so-called kernel abstraction layer, which meant that the operating system could run either a Linux kernel, like with Android, a Light OS kernel, which was running on their smartwatches, or also others. And by Harmony OS 5, they gradually got to the point where they could switch to their own kernel and cut Android completely from their system. Their whole phone now runs on their self-developed kernel with their own app frameworks, etc. Android apps no longer run natively on the phone, and the only way to use them is by installing an Android virtual machine on top of the OS. In other words, the system slowly flipped from mostly Android with a little bit of Harmony to eventually just Harmony OS with an Android VM on top. For now, the virtual machine is needed because Harmony OS itself only claims to have about 20,000 or so native apps, which are sometimes also not quite on feature parity with their more mature Android counterparts. Now, the platform is basically brand new, so this is not a surprise, but the app gap will likely be Huawei's biggest software challenge going forward. We've seen Windows Phone and many other operating systems fail at this exact thing before, regardless of how good the operating system itself ever was. Anyway, while older Huawei phones can now update to Harmony OS Next as well, that doesn't happen automatically yet, because I guess Huawei wants to avoid randomly dropping an update on unsuspecting people that nuke some of their apps that they rely on. And another limitation is that HarmonyOS Next is not available anywhere outside of China, which is why I had to import this phone myself. Technically, I found that their watches do seem to be running HarmonyOS 5 even in Europe, but none of their phones and tablets do, as those will be the ones that have app compatibility issues. Just a fun side note. I had a long conversation with Leszek Lesnar, whose channel I linked to below, and who has been using HarmonyOS devices more extensively throughout the years than anyone else I know. And he said that while the system is improving rapidly, there's still some rough edges around China for day-to-day use. All of the devices Huawei sells over here therefore run on HarmonyOS 4 for now, which still has plenty of Android code in it. I actually asked Huawei if they have plans for an international rollout for HarmonyOS Next, and they said no, but I can't help but think that they actually think the answer is not yet. Surely they're trying to establish a base in China first, and they're hoping that their large market share, especially in the premium segment there, will force app makers to adopt the platform, and then with a Chinese ecosystem in full force, I think they can start working on an international expansion later. If that works, and if they also manage to successfully bring HarmonyOS Next to laptops and tablets as well, both of which are huge ifs in my opinion, that would be a pretty massive deal, a proper third ecosystem. Now moving on to chips, Huawei used to design its own to power their phones, watches, cloud servers and more, but like most others, it relied on so-called fabs or external contract manufacturers to actually have them made. The US specifically banned any fab that used advanced US technologies from making Huawei chips without a license, which of course was basically all of them in 2020, and that led to Huawei essentially not being able to have its own chips made by anyone. So unsurprisingly, the company went all in on building a Chinese chip manufacturing industry that could work around the US sanctions. Now obviously every part of this chip journey is extremely politically sensitive, and so we don't have all the exact details from the outside, but here's the things that we can tell so far. At the end of 2023, after years of hard work, Huawei and China's leading fab, SMIC, managed to make a new chip called the Kirin 9000S. This was China's first mass-produced 7nm class chip, which was roughly equivalent to flagship performance from 2020. Both devices that I have here have basically an updated version of this same chip, and looking at synthetic benchmarks, we can see that the performance is okay, I guess, though clearly behind competing flagships. The CPU's cores I find mostly okay, but the GPU cores are especially brutal, and you can actually see the devices visually struggling with the admittedly intentionally overkill graphics of the Wildlife Extreme benchmark. This is not completely unexpected from a manufacturing process that is by now 4 to 5 years behind the bleeding edge in Taiwan, and so if you're a heavy gamer or similar, Huawei devices are probably not for you. That said, the benchmark figures are not what the devices feel like in day-to-day use. Just scrolling through the UI and doing normal productivity tasks feels really smooth, and I guess that means that Huawei has optimized the living hell out of the animations and the like to squeeze even the last bits of juice out of their weaker processors. As a person who doesn't actually game on their phones, I'm left somehow not really caring about the lack of performance in day-to-day use. We also know that Huawei likely used the same 7nm process to make AI chips like the Ascend 910C to challenge Nvidia as well. I find it even harder to evaluate those from afar, but one report claims that while they individually fall short of Nvidia's most advanced offering, collectively in a cluster, they can deliver superior performance to a rival Nvidia cluster product. Is that good? We honestly don't know, but the US did just warn companies around the world to stay away from them, so I guess they can't be too bad. Now, I think Huawei's chip business is actually in the same place as their software businesses. They've done the hard work, and now comes the really hard work. See, Huawei and their partners achieved their 7nm manufacturing process with foreign-built equipment like ASML's less advanced DUV machines. But to go significantly further, they'll almost certainly need next-generation technology called EUV, which so far only the Dutch firm ASML has cracked and the Chinese are expressly forbidden from using. We've seen rumors of a domestically developed Chinese EUV machine recently already, and so of course it's not inconceivable that they'll get there eventually, but this is one of the world's hardest technical challenges, and so we don't know how soon and how well China will be able to crack it. One thing is for sure though, while the exact details are classified, we've seen report after report claim that Huawei is fighting the chip fight with the full backing of the Chinese government. A credible report from the industry publication The Elec claims that Huawei now quietly operates 20 different fabs across China, of which 11 are full production facilities. This means that they don't just rely on the likes of SMIC, but also quietly took manufacturing into their own hands too. And what's wild is that according to The Elec, the Chinese government actually owns the shares of these companies and presumably just lets Huawei use them. Meanwhile, an earlier report from Bloomberg also claimed that the Chinese government formed one of these facilities specifically to support Huawei, and we also know that the Shenzhen city government founded SciCarrier, a massive chip equipment maker that is now worth $15 billion, reportedly to supply Huawei with all the chip manufacturing equipment that they need. So this means that on top of the 20+% of R&D spending that Huawei itself has, the Chinese government is also just throwing money at them. If you remember, the sale of Honor was also done in part by the government, so we can see that deal as basically a direct cash transfusion from the government to Huawei too. Looking at it like this, it's still impressive, but perhaps a bit less surprising that Huawei managed to avoid ever losing money. I mean, they got a ton of support when they needed it the most. Still, it's clear that in both software and chips, they've made a remarkable comeback, and these days, their devices feel exceptionally high-end and adventurous again. And so we can see from the revenues that their consumer business group, that includes phones and stuff, finally showed big growth for the first time since the ban. Now, while most of us outside of China presumably stopped following the Huawei saga very closely once it became clear that they weren't gonna get their Google services and other things back, there are of course people who did not. They kept their phones, kept tinkering with them, and kept seeing how they could work around the limitations. It looks like their patience is slowly paying off as the Huawei ecosystem is slowly becoming more and more usable again, and their devices are frankly becoming more and more interesting now too. Perhaps the most consistent and interesting voice in this community is Leszek Lesner, who I had a long chat with to get both his takes on how things went in the past and how he imagines Huawei might fare in the future. This conversation is available exclusively on Nebula for those who want to have a deeper dive, and it joins 24 other bonus videos that I've uploaded so far.
Imagine waking up in a world where Windows is no longer the default. No start button, no blue screen, no Microsoft at all. Instead, your laptop boots into a sleek new interface called Harmony OS, built by Huawei, powered by China, and spreading across millions of devices at lightning speed. What began as a mobile experiment is now turning into a global challenge to Microsoft's dominance. And here's the real shock. In China, Windows is already disappearing. So, could Harmony OS actually replace Windows worldwide? Or is this just another tech illusion backed by politics and power? Unlike Windows, which was built around personal computers, Harmony OS is designed for a connected world of devices, what Huawei calls the 1+8+N ecosystem. One phone connects to 8 major categories of hardware: tablets, laptops, wearables, TVs, speakers, smart cars, and more, each seamlessly interacting with each other. No cables, no separate logins, no compatibility headaches. Harmony OS turns your digital life into one continuous environment. Behind the scenes, Huawei has spent billions building this independence. After being cut off from US chips, cloud services, and app stores, the company doubled down on self-reliance. They developed their own chip architecture with HiSilicon, their own app gallery, their own developer tools, and crucially, their own kernel, the core of the OS. By 2024, Huawei replaced the last remaining lines of Android code in what they now call Harmony OS Next, making it a fully independent operating system. That's something even Samsung never achieved. And here's what's truly impressive. It's not just a Chinese story anymore. Huawei has begun testing Harmony OS laptops to directly challenge Windows PCs in China, and early reports show millions of Chinese users switching. The reason? Harmony OS runs smoother, boots faster, and integrates tightly with Huawei's AI features, from voice assistants to cross-device productivity tools. In a world increasingly powered by AI and data privacy, Huawei is offering something that feels fresh, modern, and sovereign. But this rise of Harmony OS isn't happening in isolation. It's part of a broader global shift, where nations and corporations are trying to escape the technological dominance of the West. And Huawei, intentionally or not, has become the symbol of that rebellion. The question now is, can Harmony OS truly challenge Windows? Not just in China, but on a global scale. Because if it can, this isn't just another software war. It's the beginning of a new digital world order. In 2024, Beijing quietly began replacing Windows across public institutions with domestic systems. The Chinese government officially approved Harmony OS and Kylin OS as secure alternatives for state use, citing data sovereignty and cybersecurity concerns. Within months, ministries, banks, and major corporations started the transition. Microsoft didn't even get a chance to negotiate. The message was clear. Foreign software can't control national infrastructure anymore. The impact on Microsoft's China operations has been massive. PC manufacturers like Lenovo and Huawei have begun shipping Harmony OS-powered laptops by default for Chinese users. Microsoft Office is being replaced by WPS Office, and Microsoft Edge by Harmony Browser, built on domestic frameworks. Even AI assistants that once ran on Windows are now integrated directly into Harmony OS, using Huawei's own Pangu AI models instead of OpenAI or Copilot. To the outside world, it might look like a simple operating system swap, but it's far more than that. It's digital sovereignty in action. China wants to ensure that its data, users, and AI infrastructure are completely insulated from foreign interference. Harmony OS is not just software, it's a strategic defense system, disguised as a user-friendly interface. And while China builds its digital wall, the rest of the world faces a different challenge. Data surveillance and online tracking are increasing everywhere. Governments, advertisers, and hackers are watching what we do online, often without our knowledge. That's why protecting your privacy has never been more important. This video is sponsored by NordVPN, the trusted leader in online security. With NordVPN, your data stays encrypted, your IP hidden, and your browsing safe, whether you're on Windows, macOS, or Harmony OS. And right now, you can get a 73% discount using the link below. Don't wait until your data is exposed. Protect it today with NordVPN. Now, as privacy becomes the new battlefield, one question emerges. If Harmony OS represents China's secure digital fortress, can Microsoft defend its empire in the rest of the world? Microsoft isn't watching quietly from the sidelines. The company knows that losing China, the world's second-largest PC market, would be a devastating blow. That's why 2025 has become the year of Microsoft's counteroffensive. First, Microsoft is rebuilding Windows around AI. With the integration of Copilot, Windows 11 and 12 are transforming into intelligent platforms capable of automating tasks, generating text, and optimizing workflow, all powered by OpenAI's models. It's no longer just an operating system, it's becoming a personal digital assistant. But here's the irony. China doesn't have access to OpenAI, meaning Harmony OS is building its own alternative AI ecosystem. So, while Microsoft leans on Western AI, Huawei is creating its own, completely offline, sovereign, and secure. Second, Microsoft is forming alliances with Western and Asian manufacturers to lock in market share. Dell, HP, and Asus have been quietly offered incentives to pre-install Windows and Microsoft 365 for global markets. At the same time, Microsoft's cloud division, Azure, is expanding aggressively into Europe, India, and Africa, territories where Huawei still faces trade restrictions. It's a strategic containment plan, but there's a deeper game here: control over developers. Microsoft owns GitHub, Visual Studio, and a massive ecosystem of enterprise tools that Harmony OS can't yet match. Developers are the oxygen of any OS. Without them, even the best software dies. That's why Huawei has been offering massive incentives, even cash rewards and tax breaks, for developers to port their apps from Android and Windows to Harmony OS. So far, the results are promising. Over 800,000 Harmony OS native apps are already in the ecosystem, but Microsoft still holds the advantage in productivity tools, gaming, and professional software like Adobe, AutoCAD, and Office, for now. Because here's what's coming next. Huawei isn't trying to copy Microsoft's old model. They're trying to leapfrog it. Harmony OS doesn't need to win every PC. It only needs to dominate the next generation of devices, smart screens, EV dashboards, and AI-integrated systems. That's where Windows looks outdated. And if Microsoft doesn't reinvent itself fast, it might soon find its empire surrounded.
What's unfolding right now isn't just a competition between two operating systems. It's a digital Cold War. On one side, the West, led by Microsoft, Google, and Apple, dominates most of the world's devices and software infrastructure. On the other side, the East, driven by Huawei, Tencent, and Alibaba, is building a parallel ecosystem, one that no longer relies on Silicon Valley's permission to function. At the center of this divide stands Harmony OS. Huawei isn't selling it as a Chinese Windows, but rather as the core of a new digital civilization, an ecosystem that connects everything, from your phone to your car, your home, and your workplace, all without leaving Chinese networks. It's a bold strategy that aligns perfectly with China's Made in China 2025 vision, to dominate not just hardware, but the software that controls it. In 2025, Huawei made a decisive move. It announced Harmony OS Next would drop all Android app compatibility. No more Google frameworks, no Western codebase. Many Western analysts called it suicide. Yet the Chinese market proved them wrong. With millions of developers migrating, Harmony OS has become the first truly post-Android OS. Independent, fast, and deeply integrated with Chinese AI infrastructure. Meanwhile, Windows continues to reign in the West, but its dominance is showing cracks. The younger generation no longer depends on Microsoft Office or even desktop computers. They live inside mobile ecosystems, Apple's, Google's, or soon Huawei's. The PC era that made Microsoft rich is fading, replaced by cross-device ecosystems and AI assistants. And Harmony OS, being built from the ground up for this connected future, may have the architectural advantage. The US is fully aware of the implications. If Harmony OS spreads beyond China into Asia, Africa, or Latin America, it could reshape global software standards, pushing US tech companies out of critical infrastructure markets. That's why Washington has already moved to limit exports of AI chips, servers, and developer tools to Chinese companies. But just like with semiconductors, these sanctions are only accelerating China's determination to build its own digital empire. And make no mistake, this battle isn't about who has the better interface or faster boot time. It's about who controls the future of computing. Every operating system defines what people can access, what data is shared, and which AI models shape our worldviews. In that sense, Harmony OS and Windows are no longer just products. They're weapons in a much larger geopolitical war.
The battle between Harmony OS and Windows is more than just a story about two tech giants. It's the beginning of a new digital order. The world is splitting into two ecosystems, one powered by Western companies that prioritize profit and cloud dependency, and another led by China, focused on control, sovereignty, and integration. Harmony OS may not replace Windows overnight, but it's planting seeds that could redefine the next decade of technology. Imagine a future where most smart devices, from phones to cars, even cities, run on a Chinese-built system entirely disconnected from Silicon Valley. For the first time in decades, Microsoft isn't the one setting the rules, it's reacting to them. In the end, the question isn't which OS will win, but which vision of the digital world we want to live in. One where innovation is open and shared, or one where it's guarded behind national walls. Whatever happens next, one thing's for sure. The age of Western software dominance is ending, and a new technological era has already begun. If you found this video insightful, hit like, share it with others, and subscribe for more deep dives into the global tech wars ahead.